Good day, muchachos. Happy Thursday, October 12th. I already had to change my plans for today. You guys threw me a curveball with some of your discussion posts. That's okay. We can reroute our plan here. I had the best intentions of talking about the amendments to the Constitution that talk about the privilege of voting. I didn't say right to voting, I said privilege of voting. But you guys, I couldn't get you to take the bait when I was talking about Article 1, Section 2 and 3 of the Constitution pertaining to the establishment of the House of Representatives and the United States Senate and who gets to vote for that. If we were to go and look at the discussion questions, some solid answers. I clearly cannot disagree with you, right? I mean, there's no one in this building that thinks more of the United States than I do. Obviously, it is the greatest country in the world. It doesn't negate the fact that there are problems, but there are problems in every country, and there are problems with every government across the world. No one is perfect, but we're the closest thing that exists to perfection. And obviously, the way our government is structured, we can continue to make progress. And that's really what you guys are talking about here, is that there is freedom. There's democracy. There is the opportunity for people to be engaged and to offer their ideas. So I thought these posts were, I thought they were good. I thought they were logical. Thought they were based on reason and fact. So those are good. If we were to go to the second question, what is the most important right? We're going to change our plan to something that we're going to talk about later, but we'll talk about it now. Because a lot of people talked about, Peltier talks about equality. Alana talked about being able to express their thoughts, and I'm assuming if a freedom of speech is created to allow people to express their thoughts, there's got to be some concept of equality there. Joe Sanders talks about the right to equal representation. Nevaeh talks about freedom of speech, correct? Freedom of speech allows Americans to have open conversations on what they think could improve their livelihoods and also express discomfort with government and leaders. Again, having some sort of equality, being equitable with our government. Like, they work for us. We have a say for us, and very similar to what John Locke was talking about. If they're not working for us, if they're not doing what we need, we vote them out. So there is a concept of equality there. Nevaeh Hunter talked about the freedom of choice. And again, we're talking about equality there. We're talking about being equitable there. People get to choose. People are free to choose what they want. No one is above, ideologically, no one is above anybody else. We're going to look at that and see if that's actually true. I do want to point out Christian Spears, because I have not heard this before in 7 trimesters of teaching this class. Christian said, I think the most important right is the right to privacy. It means that everyone has a right to keep personal information activities private. I think everyone deserves privacy. Interesting, because this has become a huge debate in the last 2 years. If you were to survey the American population and ask if it is true that they have a right to privacy, I can guarantee you about 99% of Americans would argue that there is this right to privacy in our country. Let's look at the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Okay. Obviously, the Constitution, the first articles of the Constitution lay out the powers of the government, the federal government. And in fact, with the 14th Amendment applies the U.S. Constitution to state governments, lays out what they can and cannot do. But the Bill of Rights was added because, to get the Constitution ratified between 1787 and 1789, citizens of the United States, some 44 years ago, 45 years ago, wanted to have specific rights granted, listed off. Thus, we have the Bill of Rights, a list of rights that are guaranteed. First Amendment is the freedom of expression, speech, and religion, the right to assemble, the right to seek redress for grievances. Second Amendment is to keep and bear arms. Third Amendment is no quartering of troops and people's homes during peacetime. Fourth Amendment is the right to be secure in persons, houses, papers, effects, and unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, does that grant the right to privacy? It specifically says the government can't come in and take things unless it has something called a warrant or something called probable cause, which means is proof that you've done something wrong. Does that grant the right to privacy? Fifth Amendment says the right to keep silent. Sixth Amendment talks about a speedy public trial. Seventh Amendment talks about a jury trial. Eighth Amendment says cruel and unusual punishments are banned. Ninth Amendment, here's the kicker. The Ninth Amendment says that although these rights are listed in the United States Constitution, the citizens of the United States maintain more rights than are, they say, enumerated, which means listed here. 10th Amendment says powers not delegated to the U.S. by the Constitution are retained by the states. There's no specific mention of privacy. And the concept of privacy didn't come up until the 1960s. It was a Supreme Court case called Griswold versus Connecticut, mid to late 1960s, if I'm not mistaken. And the Supreme Court case was about birth control. Can the state prohibit people from accessing birth control? Or do they have a right to privacy to make their own decisions regarding reproduction, medical health, what goes on between husband and wife? All right, that's what they were trying to decide. Again, there is no listed off specific amendment. And what the Supreme Court did in Griswold versus Connecticut is they did something called substantive law. Now, there's two types of law in the United States. You have procedural law and you have substantive law. Procedural law is based on anything that's written down, right? If I try to limit people from assembling and protesting and seeking redress from the Inver Grove Heights School Board over book banning, they would have a right to do it. It's procedural. It is written down. It is fact. It is known. It is right there in black and white. Substantive law is when you take a series of laws, or you take, in this case, a series of amendments and kind of read between the lines. And although it is not specifically mentioned, one can, in the Supreme Court case they can understand that there is a belief of some sort of privacy, right? Fourth Amendment, you have the right to be secure in your persons, houses, papers, and effects. The Fifth Amendment, you have the right to keep your mouth shut. The Ninth Amendment, the people maintain more rights than those that are listed here in the Bill of Rights. Although there is no specific procedure that lists off the right to privacy, you can infer from these three amendments that a right of privacy may exist. It is substantive law versus procedural law. The only people that get to determine, they get to make the decision between substantive law and procedural law are the courts. In this particular case, the United States Supreme Court. But the court will sometimes change their mind. And they did, in fact, do that the previous summer when they overturned Roe versus Wade, because in Roe versus Wade from 1973, maybe 74, I think it was 73, that Supreme Court case was based on this concept of privacy, which was specifically established the previous decade in the late 1960s, that people have the right to privacy and the right to make private decisions on their own. And in this case, it was about reproductive matters. Because the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade in the summer of 2022, there has been significant conversation if the Supreme Court is going to remove other substantive rights that people have had or held in recent years. In fact, one of the Supreme Court Associate Justices, Clarence Thomas, who is an exceptional conservative and many people would consider to be a strict constructionist, meaning that if it's not specific in the Constitution, it doesn't exist. He even said in his concurring opinion regarding the overturning of Roe v. Wade that the United States Supreme Court needs to review every substantive decision that they have made, every ruling that they have made, not based on specifically listed amendments, specifically listed rights, and review all of the cases in which decisions before, more or less created rights that people have maintained based on reading between the lines. which again gets us back to our essential question that we're still trying to answer. Does the United States government structure live up to our ideals of democracy? We haven't talked about the Supreme Court yet. We'll have to do that later because I'm trying to keep this to 15 minutes, but I thought that was a very interesting post. Many Americans do believe that they have a right to privacy. I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to that belief. We would have to define what privacy is. Do I believe that people have the right to be secure in their persons, their thoughts, their effects, their homes? Correct. I do. I don't think the government should be able to come in and take things from people unless they have a reason to do so. But is that privacy, or is that the ownership of property? I guess we'll have to wait and see what the Supreme Court decides, because I can guarantee you the right to privacy will come up again. And with this very conservative Supreme Court, we'll see. We'll see if they change that. And they have changed their minds before. And these 9 people are, well, I'm getting ahead of myself here because we're talking about the Supreme Court. These people don't have to answer to anyone. They have lifetime appointments. We don't vote on this. They're appointed by the president. They're confirmed by the Senate. Unless they commit a high crime and or misdemeanor, they're there. But a lot of people talked about equal representation. And we're going to look at that because probably one of the most fundamental concepts in the United States is voting, and specifically voting for the president of the United States. And many Americans still have this belief that American citizens actually vote for the president of the United States. And that is categorically not true. When citizens vote for the president, they're actually voting for the Electoral College, and it's the Electoral College who decides the president. So if we were to go down here to our notes, we've already talked about Article 1, Section 2, the House of Representatives. We talked about Article 1, Section 3, the United States Senate. And then we talked about Article 2, Section 1. This is the presidency of the United States. Each state shall appoint in such a manner as the legislature there may of direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in Congress to pick the president of the United States. The electors pick the president of the United States. Each state has a certain number of electors. Minnesota has 10. We have 8 representatives, 2 senators. California has 54. 52 representatives, 2 senators. South Dakota has 3. 2 senators, 1 representative. They are the ones that pick the president of the United States, those electors. So we're going to see how that process works, and we're going to see if we have this right, this right of equality and equitable representation. So what you guys are going to do for tomorrow is read the article on the Electoral College. Here it is. It says 8 pages. That's because there's big pictures in here and there's graphs and the font is big. But there's 2 questions that you're going to answer, and I hope, please do this. Copy and paste the questions into the comment section and then respond to each question based on the article. And we'll talk about equitable representation or equal representation tomorrow after you guys read this. Please make sure your answers are posted by, what did I say? 12:10 tomorrow, 12:10 tomorrow. Great post in the discussion. I like it. We'll talk voting rights next week, and we'll keep our focus right now on equitable, equal representation in the United States government. Until I see you guys tomorrow, stay safe, make smart choices, always go Spartans.